With Street Fighter VI now officially on the horizon, the community finds itself beginning to speculate in the usual ways as we wonder about all the crucial decisions being made by developers right now. This ranges from things like art direction all the way to the particulars of frame data, but few topics are as popular as roster speculation. How many characters will we initially get to choose from? How large will the roster ultimately grow to be? Who will return from past games, and just how many never-before playable characters will we get to explore for the very first time? It's this last question we're honing in on today, and while we won't know for sure until Capcom actually tells us, taking a look over the history of Street Fighter games to see how things have been handled in the past is our best bet for the time being. As such, we're looking back at Street Fighters 1, 2, Alpha, 3, 4, and 5 to see how many characters made their playable debuts in each, what percentage of initial rosters were made up of first-time playables, and how many of these characters were added in total over each game's supported lifespan. Street Fighter 1 is a unique example and probably isn't the most helpful for our purposes here, but we will give it a quick nod. It kicked the franchise off in 1987, and thus we have a lot to be thankful toward SF1 for, but it only introduced two playable characters, Ryu and Ken, the latter of which didn't really have his own gameplay identity until Street Fighter 2. We got to meet other fighters like Sagat, Adon, Birdie, and Gen, who would later prove very important to the franchise, but we couldn't take any of them under our control. So technically speaking, 100% of Street Fighter 1's roster was newly playable, and it never grew beyond that, so that statistic never really changed at all. Street Fighter 2 is also somewhat unique from the rest of the games on this list, since it, for many intents and purposes, can also be viewed as the start of the franchise in certain important respects. The game started with 8 playable characters, known as the World Warriors, 6 of who were not in Street Fighter 1. Chun-Li, Guile, Dalsim, Zangief, Blanka, and E. Honda all got their start in Street Fighter 2 back in 1991. Champion Edition rolled out in 1992, and in addition to giving players the ability to engage in mirror matches, also made playable the game's 4 boss characters, Balrog, Vega, Sagat, and M. Bison. The new Challengers update in 1993 brought with it 4, new challengers in Cammy, Fei Long, DJ, and T-Hawk. And it was in 1994's Super Turbo that Akuma was added as a secret boss. Though it took a while for players to uncover, there was an unlock code that allowed you to play as the overpowered demonic fighter. Street Fighter 2 started with 8 characters and ended with 17 if you include Akuma, which we are. Technically 15 or 88% of them were new since Ryu and Ken were playable in Street Fighter 1, and every single one of these 17 characters has been brought back as playable in subsequent Street Fighter games. With the franchise now fully established and with some history behind it, Street Fighter Alpha offers us our first real example where Capcom had to decide how to mix old and new. Alpha 1 launched in 1995 and featured a starting roster of 13 playable characters, 7 of which were new to the character select screen. This included Rose, Charlie Nash, Sodom, Guy, Birdie, and Adon, and then Dan, who was one of 3 hidden fighters. Alpha 2 came in 1996 and added the likes of Gen, Rolento, Sakura, and one more hidden fighter in Evil Ryu. Then in 1998, Alpha 3 rolled out and gave Karin Kanzuki, Cody Travers, and Rainbow Mika their first playable Street Fighter debuts. Things get a little tricky here, as we could count hidden Bison doll characters Julie and Junie, but they're both essentially Cammy clones with alternate specials and supers. We'll note them, but we're not going to include them in our statistics. Additional Alpha 3 ports added Eagle, Ingrid, and Maki, but we're also not going to count them because these were on handheld consoles only. As such, the Street Fighter Alpha newcomer stats are as follows. Things kicked off with 7 of 13 characters seeing their first playable appearances and ended with 14 of 26, don't forget that Balrog was a hidden character in Alpha 3. This meant that 54% of the Alpha characters were newly playable, and of them, only Sodom has yet to return to a main Street Fighter entry character select screen. While Capcom was producing the Alpha series, they also started producing Street Fighter 3, which initially released in 1997. As far as never-before playable characters go, this was easily their most ambitious endeavor yet, as 10 of the initial 12 characters were fresh faces. Alex, Dudley, Yun, Oro, Necro, Elena, Ibuki, Sean, and then a hidden Yang and Gil accompanied the only returners, Ryu and Ken. That same year, Second Impact came out and brought Hugo and Urien into the fray for the very first time. It also gave Yang a distinct moveset from Yun, whom he was a palette swap of previously. Third Strike then added Makoto, Q, Remy, and 12 in 1999, finalizing the Street Fighter III roster at 20 playable characters, 16 of which for the first time. 5 of these 15, including Q, Remy, Sean, Necro, and 12, have not yet returned as playable. Street Fighter IV launched in 2008 in arcades and made it to home consoles in early 2009. The vanilla version of this game featured a whopping 25 character starting lineup, with 6 of those being newcomers, including Sea Viper, Abel, El Fuerte, Rufus, Seth, and Goken. 2010's Super Street Fighter IV update brought Juri and Hakan into the fray, and Arcade Edition brought in Oni that same year. 2014's Ultra Street Fighter IV update welcomed both Poison and DiCaprio as first-time playables. In the end, 11 of Street Fighter IV's 44 characters were first-timers. Goken, El Fuerte, Abel, Rufus, Hakan, DiCaprio, and Oni have all not returned, but it's worth noting that there's only been one main series entry opportunity since Street Fighter IV. Finally, we have 2016 Street Fighter V that launched with a roster of 16 characters. 4 of them, Laura, Rashid, Nikali, and Fong, were brand new, and over the years, 10 more characters have seen their first playable appearances in this game. This includes Colleen, Ed, Abigail, Minat, Zeku, Falk, G, Lucia, Akira, and Luke, as 14 of the 45 Street Fighter V roster mates are new. We do know that Luke will be headed to Street Fighter VI, but no one else has had the opportunity for a second appearance yet. So what can we garner about Street Fighter VI from all of this? Well, in terms of roster size, it seems modern expectations and recent practices would give us a launch cast of 20 to 25 characters. Earlier games tended to introduce more newcomers, as Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter III had 54% and a whopping 82% never-before playables in their respective initial rosters. Street Fighters 4 and 5 both saw 25% of their rosters as first-time playables, and we'd guess Capcom might continue with this trend into Street Fighter 6. If that is indeed the case, then about 5 to 7 of SF6's base roster members will have never been playable in the franchise before. These could be brand new inventions for the game, or characters who have been lurking about in the background of games and alternate Street Fighter media, such as Goken and Akuma's master, Gotetsu, or the recently revealed axe-wielding lumberjack from the Udon comics, Pietra. We'd love to hear how you think Capcom will approach building Street Fighter VI's roster, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and, as always, please like and subscribe if you've been entertained or informed by this video. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.